안녕하십니까. Hello. Yes.
Remember this guy? It's Kim Jung Gi, the guy with the amazing memory and brush pen who draws a lot. In my last interview with him, I tried to figure out who he is and why he's so good. My name is Stan Prokopenko. In this episode of Proko, I'm gonna dive deeper. I'm gonna analyze his methods, his techniques, and his process. I'm gonna figure out how he draws. If you like this video, please subscribe. Like last time, we'll use a voice actor to translate Kim Jung Gi. He's from South Korea and doesn't speak English.
It might look like I'm just doodling right now, but in my head, things are going crazy. It's not that easy.
So, let's find out what goes through the mind of Kim Jung Gi. Several years ago, I attended one of his workshops where he handed out these illustrations that describe his drawing process. Let's start here.
First, once I decide to draw, I think about what. And then I create another me in my mind. Another me, aka mini-me, will be traveling through the space of what I want to draw. Let's take this situation for example. Now, I send a bunch of my mini-me's all over the space to find the best suited location for me to draw. Which perspective should I use? Where is the coolest angle or composition with the most impact? Will I be seeing in Nippleman's perspective? Or should I see in perverted Pokemon's perspective? What kind of situation is it? What kind of things are around me? I think about what kind of buildings, vehicles, people, animals, plants would fit this situation. After organizing it in my mind, I have to materialize it, but this is not as easy as it sounds. I have to recall all of my background knowledge. You can also use all the resources at your disposal, so there is no need to think that you have to draw without looking at any reference material. I also collect and use many reference materials when I draw. I have trained myself to be able to recall images. A habit of always observing helps to remember more. And if I understand the subject matter, I'll be able to get more from it. It is important to draw a lot, but I believe understanding what you're drawing is more important. Once you understand the subject matter, you'll be able to remember it longer, manipulate it, and apply your own design. When I draw, I use two methods. I can doodle spontaneously, and I use this method for commissioned projects. A lot of information is being shared during each project, so I tend to have in mind what to draw and what is to be included before I start. I begin when the plan just comes together in my head.
Of course, the mini-me's he creates, that's just an analogy. He simply considers different angles of his subjects and picks the ones that look best. As you'll see in this video, he's a master at visualizing and drawing things in perspective. This frees him to draw things from imagination instead of being a slave to a photo. He says, "Don't draw what you see, draw what you have seen."
You know, when kids back then drew tanks, they would only draw it like this, from the side, a very flat drawing. But I noticed that depending on the perspective, the lines would look angled differently. And so I just drew what I saw. And in cartoon TV shows, I'd see how tanks or other objects would look more cool when they're drawn from different angles. I'd try to float an image in my mind, try to turn it to the angle that'll look best, experimenting to make my drawing look as fancy as possible.
So, did you study perspective theory, 1 point, 2 point, 3 point perspective? Did you study that before you were able to draw 3D form? Or was it more just observation and drawing a lot?
I'd say the latter. I watched and drew. When I was younger, private perspective drawing classes didn't exist at all. But when I look back at my drawings from kindergarten, I used a 1 point or 2 point perspective drawing technique for drawing dimensional objects. Obviously, I had no idea which technique I was using at that point. But I sort of taught myself to be good at it by getting into a habit of observing things around me. For instance, when I'm sitting down at a table, I look at the table in front of me and compare it to another table in the room. I think about the relationship between the table and the people, and then a thought comes to me. Does the dimension of the table change as the table gets further away from me? Sometimes when I'm in my car in a parking lot, I think to myself about the dimensions of other cars and how they are different from each other. After training my mind to compare everything, it changed the way I think. I now see objects more transparently.
He began studying perspective theory in college. He struggled to understand the math behind it, but eventually he got it. When he was already drawing in 3D, he struggled to understand it because, to him, it was intuitive, not measured. Understanding perspective intuitively is a keystone in drawing like Kim Jung Gi.
Did it help to learn the theory, or was it just confusing and then you just went back to your natural observation skills?
아니요, 도움이 많이 됐습니다.
Learning theories helped me a lot. When I combined the existing knowledge with the new set of theories, it helped me set a foundational basis. There were some that were different from what I knew or thought, and some that were similar.
In his workshops, he talks about perspective a lot. Let's try to understand what goes through his mind when he's drawing three-dimensional objects. Many inexperienced artists will approach drawing with flat contour lines. A concept he uses a lot to help defeat this is cross contour lines. Adding some cross contour lines gives it depth and defines the angle. A very similar contour with a different cross contour suggests a very different angle. This is an easy concept to understand, but difficult to put into practice when you're drawing something more complicated than a simple mannequin with obvious cross contours. He does it all over the place in his details. He looks for it in the opening of a pocket or wrinkles in the fabric.
You can utilize the stitching of clothing. It can be a good indication of the folds and the cross contour line of the body.
Here's another pillar for drawing like Kim Jung Gi: the three axes. Everything has a height, a width, and a depth. When he starts drawing, he imagines a perspective grid, or a box containing the object he's about to draw, because a box defines those three axes.
The first stroke that I made was the helmet line. I'm referencing that line along with my perspective so I don't go off of my grid in my head. When I first drew that line, my overall eye level was defined. The first stroke that I made was above my eye level. It's tilting up and tapering down. And the indication of the eyes has more stiff curves because it's honoring the vanishing point. The very first stroke that I made is a very prominent stroke in my mind, because that's when I define the eye level and the overall perspective. You will often see people drawing guidelines or perspective lines before they draw. I'm referencing every stroke that I'm making as actually being a perspective guideline in itself, because I'm referencing the lines that I'm making as I go, and I always try to pay attention to the angles and the perspective that I'm making.
This applies not just to the helmet, but to the whole figure the helmet is sitting on. We can extend the box on all three axes in the perspective he's already established. And now we can fit the rest of the figure in this box. Anything that is parallel to the planes of this box will follow these angles. But not everything is parallel. The arm, for example, is tilted diagonally, so it has its own set of angles.
The box that you're seeing right now, that's the first image that I float in my head when I try to draw different characters in different perspectives. You need to define what you want to draw before you make the first stroke. I've found that if you have the fundamentals down, the speed of progress accelerates much more quickly. I improved really fast once I had understood the shape of the cube. In it was perspective, mass, shape, and shadow.
So a lot of your drawings are in fisheye perspective or a 5-point perspective. Have you ever studied that?
예, Fisheye, 예.
Yes, I did study that as well. Fisheye structure is a structure that was created out of my ego. That is, ego to include as much as possible on a single scene. Let's say I'm at a coffee shop. If I were to draw the coffee shop, I can draw the left, middle, and right side. But through this structure, I simply wanted to squeeze everything into one frame. So I looked at this side and drew this side and then this side, and it naturally turned into this fisheye structure. The more I used that style, the easier it became for me to draw it. And even when I doodle normally, after much practice and repetition, my hands have been trained to create this structure, and thanks to that, I can apply it to different areas, such as screen compositions.
When depth is intuitive and you understand an object from all angles, you can draw it from any angle. And you'll be able to draw things you've never actually observed, such as a scene looking down at a coffee shop with fisheye perspective applied to it. He observed it from the ground, but he understands each object in the scene well enough to draw it from above. And he understands fisheye perspective enough to apply it to anything. He can add, remove, or modify the objects in his scene as he wishes to serve his story and composition. Of course, all this takes practice and a large visual library. He would go to the library and observe people looking down at them from the second floor. He observed his brother as he's lying down. He compared the way body parts look from different angles. Of course, he also has a really good understanding of human anatomy. An exercise he recommends everyone does is to look at an object from one angle and draw it from several other angles.
You should be able to draw any angle you imagine because you're floating the image in your head, visualizing as you draw along. People might question if this is really necessary for character design. The answer is absolutely yes, because if you do this exercise and you're able to visualize and draw in three-dimensional forms from your imagination, you'll have a much easier time designing your own unique elements.
This not only trains your ability to draw perspective intuitively, but also helps you memorize the object you're drawing, so you can build that visual library. As a kid, when he really wanted something, like a bike, he would draw it a lot, until he was good at drawing bikes.
If I knew how to draw a bicycle, then I can draw a motorcycle. If I can draw a motorcycle, then I can draw a car. So once I made that connection, there were so many things I was able to draw without looking at reference.
There are a lot of things that are difficult to observe in real life. It's not easy to find a place where we can observe a variety of spacesuits, or scuba gear, or tanks from specific wars. But we have a lot of resources to study these things, like books, movies, YouTube, or Google image search.
I used to collect a lot of references that I couldn't observe from real life.
He talks a lot about seeing things in your head before you start and while you're drawing. Visualization is another key pillar in drawing like Kim Jung Gi.
When you're visualizing the drawing that you're going to draw, are you seeing it linearly with the lines, or are you just seeing three-dimensional forms and then you translate it into lines on paper?
The answer is to get into the habit of perceiving every object in 3 dimensions. I would tell my students to imagine things as if it was so real you could smell it. The purpose of this is to fully immerse themselves into whatever they're drawing. It works the same way as the green screen for computer graphics widely used during movie production. When observing people, the chain of thoughts that are going through your mind should be this person is standing behind him, and then there's another person behind that person, and another object.
So, contrary to what many believe, he doesn't see the completed drawing in his head before he starts. He sees it realistically, as if he was actually observing it, and he doesn't always see a complete scene. If he's just sketching for fun, he'll start with one element and an idea and see where it takes him.
When the subject matter is given, I sit and visualize for a few minutes, but when I have more freedom, I just draw. This is something I was working on a while ago. I was portraying the process of a surgery, and I ended up creating more images and backgrounds spontaneously. When I thought about a surgical procedure being done, I initially thought about drawing the inside of a human brain. But then I realized it might be too boring, so I decided to change the human into an alien. So pretty much everything can be created spontaneously.
I asked him how he learned to translate his vision of the real world into a line drawing.
I found myself being more detached from simple lines. I used to do a lot of underlying pencil sketches, and I left a lot of lines in them. Yeah, very meticulously. Back then, I also had a bad temper, so when I did not like the way things looked, let's say the back of a person, I would tear it apart, draw, and repeat this process until I had what I liked. There's even a drawing when I did that 11 times. However, as I gained more knowledge and experience, the number of lines in my drawing became less and less, and the drawing became more simplified. It used to take 30 lines to draw a face, but that's not the case anymore. The same goes for the eyes. It'd take multiple attempts to create the look of an eye that I wanted, but now I can draw it in one go. So, this is basically how I got to develop my current style of lines. The key is you have to first visualize what you want to draw in your head and try to jot it down with one stroke. Don't be afraid of using pen because it's permanent, but consider using a graphite pencil so you have no pressure of making a mistake and build that wrist strength. Being scared of making a mistake is just not going to help you. So consider the most familiar medium that you might be using right now and just try to practice a lot. When people see me doing a live drawing, they often try out using a brush pen, but the first time you try it, it's a new medium, so it's going to be pretty difficult on your wrist, just to break the habit. Once you practice more and become more familiar with what you use, no matter what it is, it's going to be a useful tool for you.
When he was young, he was inspired by anime and manga, so his drawings naturally gravitated toward linear. Eventually, he started studying skilled inkers like Gibson and Korean artist Youngwon Kim, and a bunch of Europeans and Americans that he can't remember. He's known for his linear style, but he actually does a lot of tonal work too. The path to mastering shading is the same path we just discussed. Lots of observation and understanding three-dimensional form. When you have enough experience that all this technical stuff becomes intuitive, like perspective, anatomy, hand control, shading, you can instead focus on the story, the character design, and the composition of your drawing. Kim Jung Gi is thinking about the little details that communicate things about the object. Even the type of screw that is used in a piece of tech can tell the viewer when the tech was made.
For example, let's talk about headphones. You know how headphones are manufactured with different designs? It could be a minimalistic design, or it could have many little screws that are more masculine. Those are the details that I utilize in my character designs. The different types of bolts and screws can suggest the generation, timeline, and location where this character is living in.
He says a very simple way to design a character is to humanize a creature. This makes sense because you can use your knowledge of human anatomy to hide your ignorance of frog anatomy, while still getting across the idea of a frog. This can expand your range of types of characters you can design, and now you can play with human character design ideas to give the frog a story, like giving it specific clothes or a gun to show that it's a gangster frog. And you can play with body types to give it personality. This tall frog is more intimidating. This is the type of stuff he's actively thinking about. He's not distracted by trying to fix his perspective mistakes or basic drawing issues. He's thinking about what he's drawing and what makes it interesting. He thinks about focal points. Areas of detail will be more of a focal point. He says to add contrast between detailed areas and simple large shapes. He shows in this example the simple jaw plate and the complicated wires and ventilation all around it. He uses things like stitching on clothes to define the contour and movement of the body.
So, at this stage, I visualize how she's going to pose and draw all the elements to go along with that pose. Don't just pay attention to her anatomy, meaning her bone structure. We also think about the thickness of her body, the skin that's touching. Is her clothing tight against her skin, or is it sitting on top with a gap from her skin? Also, the micro designs and micro indications are very, very important. A lot of artists that I see often make the mistake of just drawing the minor details very loosely, which is incorrect and could be bothersome. You have to indicate the thickness and the contour line, even of the small nuts and bolts that match the major perspective lines. That's what makes the character realistic. Whenever you draw, you're creating a story. You're not just drawing a character. Once you drop down one character, that means you're creating a story that revolves around that character. So after I draw the first character, I start thinking of a sub-character and how the characters interact. And that becomes a whole story. So it was the third year of college. I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, so I was just drawing at home. It was raging drawing, like I've got nothing else to do, nowhere to go, I'll just draw. I used to just curse people with beautiful girlfriends and say, watch where I'll be in 10 years. I'll steal your girlfriend 10 years from now. And I'll just be in my room just drawing. I don't remember exactly what I was drawing, but then I had a realization. Hey, I don't think I'll have any problems drawing any form in perspective from now on. If someone was like, hey, Jung Gi, draw this or draw that, I don't have any problems visualizing the form anymore. Since my drawings are based on what I had previously seen, it is a reflection of the depth of my knowledge. After looking at my drawing, it'd be easy for you to know who I am, what I know, what I am interested in, and how I feel. I'm not hiding anything because there isn't anything that's worth hiding. Ever since I was 6 years old, I told everyone that my dream is to become a cartoonist. So I had my goal very early on. But when I actually became a professional artist, it was pretty late. I was 27 when my first artwork was published.
You hear that? He's been rage drawing since he was 6 and didn't become a pro until he was 27. That's 2 full decades. Let's give ourselves some slack. But also approach it with as much enthusiasm and professionalism as he does.
When you get your first opportunity as a professional artist, you have to consider that you're doing this for your own personal use. Have ownership of your artwork. It actually took me a while to have that kind of professionalism, not just giving artwork for money or pleasing a client, but pleasing myself with the achievement of the artwork I just made. A lot of young artists just getting into the industry often make that mistake. If you just chase after money or fame, even when you're just starting out, even someone like myself, you just can't get fooled by social media. If you get so many likes on one drawing and say, oh my gosh, I'm becoming something, but it's just a one-time fame that you're going to do over the web and that's it. I think drawing a lot and really having a strong foundation will make you a good artist because people will just acknowledge you. And those common mistakes young artists will make is because they feel pressure to be famous in a short period of time. But you cannot force fame or success.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. 감사합니다.